seafaring men have gone ashore, and tomorrow the landlubbers will swarm over her like ants, carrying back the bags and the bales which are her cargo. The bags and the bales are full of things which came from lands where a crane is still only a bird, and a ship a camel.
When Britain was a great trading nation, her ships returned heavy with cargoes from around the world.
And now they are bags and bales and boxes in a dark hold, waiting as night falls for the coming of the ants in the morning.
John Berry was a crane driver at Bristol's docks for 45 years.
When I was working here, they had cranes everywhere. The dock company had 23 or 26 steam engines of their own, and you couldn't move for lorries and trucks. And you name it, we had it. Anything from bags of bones, skins, animal feed, timber, aluminium, copper, butter, cheese, offals, everything was loose. Even your timber had to be unloaded, board by board. The list goes on indefinite.
When John started work as a 14-year-old apprentice, the docks were booming. In 1947, 4.5 million tonnes of raw material sailed into Bristol, and all of it was lifted by rail-mounted dockside cranes. The dry dock hasn't seen a ship for years, but its 25-ton electric crane still waits stoically.
This crane was used mainly for the dry dock. They take the propeller or the rudder off the ship, and then this crane would go down the bottom of the dry dock and bring it up, because it was too heavy for any steam cranes. Or she could turn right round and put cargo on ships in the wet dock. It was built in 1911.
John hasn't climbed the ladder to the crane's engine room for 16 years.
Blimey, what a difference. All this used to be spotless. Wasn't a drop of oil to be seen anywhere. Everything was painted a beautiful dark green, and there was some pride took in it. Don't look like there's much pride left now.
At its busiest, 6,000 workers flooded to Bristol's docks each morning, many of them with no promise of a day's work.
Dockers, tallymen, checkers, stevedores, hatchmen, winchmen, samplers, grain porters, timber porters, teamers, tacklemen.
It was a tough, labour-intensive world, and dockers were on piecework, paid only for what they shifted. Crane drivers were full-time employees of the port, and this status meant they were top of the dockside pecking order.
Lumpers, and just as you think you've named them all, up goes a crane driver to his seat in the sky.
Very often, if your father worked down here, you come to work here. So that's how I come to work here. My father was on the dock, so I come to work on the dock. Yeah. Right. Have a look, see what we're doing. That's the slewing brake when you peg down at night, so the wind don't blow around. So before we start, we got to take you off. Right, now we're all ready to go to work. If you want to go around to the left, just push the lever down, push him round, and around to the left you go.
All cranes do three things: slew, derrick, and hoist.
Get where you want to. Just shut him off. Come steady down on this slewing brake. If you want to load's too far away, just push your lever down, push him round, and out goes the jib. But you can see that creeping down now. It tells you how many foot you are away from the heel of the crane. The middle one is your hoisting. Down, lower. The beauty of this is you can have all three going at once. There we are.
Occasionally, this 90-year-old crane still unloads steel pipes and girders. Scrap metal and cement come into the port, but most ships leave empty. The only cargo evident today is hidden in anonymous containers.
When it come to learning crane driving, the driver used to take you up an empty crane and show you the levers, and you gradually got used to the levers and where they were and how to catch the swing. He's done that until he thought you were good enough to try cargo. And God blimey, that's when the fun started. Everything was piecework. As soon as a learner went up in the crane, all the dockers got up in arms. We don't want him up there, it cost us money.
African hardwoods unloaded at Bristol docks were carried by rail to the sawmills. At Charlton, they were unloaded by another crane on rails. It chugged up and down the same 100-yard track for 40 years. Built in 1937 to a Victorian design, it only ever had one purpose: to pick up logs at one end of its rails and to put them down at the other end. Its solid simplicity made it ideal for the job.
This crane was working at Charlton Sawmills when I first saw it. That was in 1935. So it's really old, getting on, poor old fella. All you want is steam and water. That's all you want. And fire, of course. It's cheap and powerful. You can do anything with it, really. Move anything with it. I learned, well, I didn't learn, really. The chappie that was driving at the time was taken ill. And the foreman said, oh, you were in the Navy, you know about steam, get up there and drive the crane. And that's how it started. And within about half an hour, I knew the cogs of the wheels and everything. And it was just a matter of getting used to this fella, when it wanted firing and when not, you know. Well, this crane is a 5-ton lift. With the jib actually extended as far as it will, it's a 1-ton lift. So you've got a range of 1 to 5 tons, depending on the length of the jib. The biggest lift I've ever did on this crane was 8-ton one. It was a lot. It made her shudder a bit, but she made it. And that was mahogany log from Africa, I think, came from originally. A big one. The slab wood that came off the first cut, they took off the side of the log. That was used for this crane. They just cut it into pieces and threw it outside for me to burn.
With an endless supply of wood for its boiler, the crane was self-sufficient and so cheap to run that it continued working right up into the 80s.
I suppose the main timber we had in the mill was beech. Sometimes oak, ash, and mahogany, of course, and occasionally a cedar we got. And with the cedar, if you put it on the fire, you can get a perfume from it. It was beautiful. And put it on the fire, it sounded lovely. My wife would often accuse me of going out with another girl when I used to go on.
Staying on the rails was fine in sawmills and the docks, but other industries needed more flexibility. It was time for cranes to get off the well-beaten track. This little crane was built at the same time as the steam sawmill crane. It weighed half as much, but could lift the same weight. The crucial difference was the fact that it had wheels and could move around a yard to lift anything, anywhere.
The crane's about 1938. It's made by Rapiers of Ipswich. It's a 6-ton yard crane. It's a well-constructed job, very strong, very sturdy.
The Rapier was an electrically powered crane with a petrol generator. It was comparatively simple to drive.
3 levers. The first lever, the bottom lever, is purely travel, forward and reverse. Second lever is the hoist, which is the up and down on the hook. And the third lever is the derrick, or the jib, which is the up and down motion of the crane for lifting. It's purely put your foot down and go principle, really. The more you generate, the faster you will go, really. There is a restriction on the engine, so you can't actually over-rev it too much. The tyres are solid rubber tyres, driven from the back, so you steer from the back, which is a bit awkward until you get used to it. You can go at 6 miles an hour, approximately. That's the general sort of speed you should run it at. It's a bit dodgy after that. You can move quite easily with quite a heavy load on it. Positioning, again, is a problem until you get used to the steering, but otherwise you can get near enough anywhere.
6 miles an hour was quite sufficient for a yard crane, but the Rapier's hard wheels weren't designed for long distance. Cranes needed to hit the road. In the booming 50s, men like Jock Morrison could drive to work. It was the start of a brand new idea, crane hire.
It looks enormous the first time you drive it. The car driver never likes them because they're always going slow. This went forever, these things. It's 60-year-old and it's still running. There's not a lot can go wrong with it. Well, you're always busy. Oh, aye, plenty of work. You might roll at 9, 10 o'clock at night. That's from 7 o'clock in the morning. No set hours.
It was Coles crane builders that came up with the revolutionary idea of bolting a crane onto the back of a truck. By the mid-40s, the invention of stronger pneumatic tyres meant that even relatively large cranes could be truly mobile.
Well, this is all the air conditioning there is in this crane. It's all railway type. And that's it. No heaters for winter.
The 1943 Thornycroft Amazon truck was driven by a diesel engine which also powered the crane on its back.
Well, it's diesel electric. The diesel engine in front goes through a PTO shaft and drives a big generator for electrics for the back.
In order to generate electrical power through the Amazon's power takeoff shaft, or PTO, Jock has to increase the engine revs.
There's two-way levers on each switch. Put it left, you go hook to go down. Put it in the middle, neutral. Put it to right, the hook goes up. Slew's the same. It's all done electric. You never put your fingers in when it's running. It's a DC and it grabs you and you can't let it go. Soon kill you that. Most cranes, there are only 3 levers. Once you drive one crane, you can drive any. It's 5 ton. But on test weight it'll lift 6.5. Oh, it's strong. In this day it was a good crane.
This truck-mounted crane was the first of a new generation. Hired out for construction, road building and civil engineering, it had endless potential for work. As building projects became more ambitious and crane hire companies competed for heavier lifts, mobile cranes could only get bigger.
Let me, baby, let me do.
The mobile has come a long way since 1943. It's no longer just a crane on the back of a truck. This state-of-the-art mobile crane can lift 25 tons at the push of a button. With its stabilising hydraulic outriggers, 100-foot telescopic boom and top road speed of 60 miles per hour, it has everything a crane driver could ask for. The hydraulic crane boasts the ultimate in modern technology, but when it comes to the really big lifts, it is easily outflanked by the strong arm of the fixed jib crane. In the world of crane hire, strut drivers are the heavyweights.
This is a boiler suit, not a track suit. We get there slow but sure, and when we do start to outlift them, we outlift them, no trouble at all.
Built in 1971, Rosie, a giant strut crane, is rated to lift 1,000 tons.
Rosie's called Rosie because the company that commissioned it in the first place is a company called Boner Rosenkrantz, which is a German company. Rather than keep pronouncing Boner Rosenkrantz, yeah, right, it's Rosie's been shortened. That's a nickname, everybody knows Rosie. A nice old lady. The idea of a big machine like this is it will pick up tremendous weights at tremendous distances. She's been building 3 Morris container cranes. 2 have already been built and are shipped down the dock. This one's standing here now in its final stages. I think the maximum weight in a container is 40 tons. Where the Rosie up block is now, it's almost level with the end of his jib, and we can still go another 15 metres beyond, and I can still pick up 40 tons right at the end of the boom, so therefore I can outlift him.
Rosie can easily outlift the cranes she builds. Her jib is worth boasting about as well. At 646 feet, it's longer than any other mobile cranes in the world. Although classed as a mobile, dismantling Rosie takes 3 days, the help of 2 telescopic cranes, and a convoy of 26 juggernauts to carry her on to the next job. Only Rosie's core pod can be hauled along on its own wheels.
This part, this is the Shirler trailer, and this is at the back end, which is connected to the pod. And the pod is carrying the slew ring, and the crane is there on the pod. You can see the number of wheels on it. The total number of wheels back and front, we've got a 64, and we're trying to keep the axle weights below 12 ton for travelling. Go around roundabouts, whistle up and down. Generally speaking, if you can get a 40-foot articulated trailer around there, we can get a 110-footer crane round there.
Rosie's 100-ton jib can slew through 360 degrees whilst carrying a huge load.
That, essentially, that's the core of the crane. That's where it sits. That's where the strength of the machine lies, right in that slew ring there. Right, what you put on the front, how much ballast you put on the back, right, you can't exceed the strength of that slew ring right there. Real powerful slew ring, you've got a real powerful machine.
To stay upright, Rosie must spread her enormous weight onto 4 outriggers.
Those outrigger pans are probably the strongest outrigger pans that were ever built for any crane anywhere, at any time at all. 8 ton apiece. I don't think nobody in the world would ever want to build a pan as strong as that again. We can still operate this machine from 1,000 ton to 1,800 ton, just as it is, right, without altering it, modifying the outriggers or anything. These are strong enough to take it.
In 1971, the concept of a crane able to lift 1,000 tons was unbelievable. Faced with the unknown, Rosie's design team massively over-engineered her. As a result, 25 years on, Rosie has more built-in strength than all of her modern rivals. And she still hasn't reached her full lifting potential. High above our cities and towns is a community with its head in the clouds. It is the world of tower cranes and their drivers.
There's always been a central ladder in a tower crane. They tell me there's lifts, but I've never seen one. I've always climbed from the bottom, and all my mates have always climbed as well. That's the thing you get used to. And I suppose it stops the drivers getting fat.
As cities have become more crowded and ground space more expensive, buildings have been forced skyward. Britain's concrete horizon would not have been possible without the tower crane.
This is a very busy job. Whatever you see on a building site, we lift. The crane never stops. The construction industry seems to be linked with the economy. And as the economy goes down, the building construction in the city, office blocks and that, it seems to dry up. We went through a flat spot a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, when there was nothing. You wouldn't see a tower crane here. 5 years previous to that, it was like a forest. And as you see now, it's like a forest again, isn't it? The driver on the blue one over there, I know him. And behind us over here on the yellow ones, the Langs ones, there's drivers I know there. You know, and as you look around, you know which driver's driving which crane. It's, so you never get lonely, there's always somebody to look at it.
The Meccano-like construction of tower cranes means that they can be assembled wherever there is work. It only takes a couple of days to put one up.
Tower cranes are built with large mobiles. The tower is put together, one on top of the other, or pinned or bolted. And then the slew ring comes up in a lump, the A-frame and the jibs are made up on the ground and they're lifted up in one piece normally. Saying that, the crane to our left was built with a mobile and that crane built this one.
Tower cranes freestand up to 200 feet. After that, they need to be anchored to the side of the construction. Keeping tower cranes in balance is crucial.
If a tower crane is set up right, it's perfectly safe. There's no way you can ever pull them over. The back ballast moves on these two, and it gives it a more stabilising effect because the crane is in balance the whole time. So as you jib out to put your load out further, your ballast goes out further. So in actual fact, the whole lot is in balance the whole time.
Perched alone in his cab, the tower crane driver is cocooned from the frenetic activity of the site below.
So you're sitting looking at people from above, you know? It's much, much easier from above than it is from below up, as in a crawler crane or a mobile. You can judge your distances much, much better. You can drop it down to within a few feet straight away, and with a few seconds, you can get it very, very accurate. You can just tap somebody on the head with a chain very gently on top of the helmet, but it's not a practice you get away with if the safety officer caught you, but they're very, very accurate. I've always enjoyed plant, whether it's tower cranes, crawler cranes, mobile cranes. I worked a good few years in heavy plant with motor scrapers and bulldozers and that, you know, caterpillars, and I've just always liked plant.
Coming up next on Discovery Channel, we head to the airport, which is big in Japan in more ways than one. Superstructures is after the break.